Hey, what's up guys? I'm Mr. Chris with Infotainment.com. Today we're back with our 2022 Jeep Gladiator. We're doing the BSM upgrade this time, and this is actually super similar to our Wrangler upgrade. It'll include your taillights, the side mirrors, and our custom harness and programmer. But the biggest difference is how it installs. So we're going to walk through the whole install again. I have Danny, he's going to help me knock this one out for you, so let me get into the install. All right, so we're gonna start at the rear of our Gladiator. We're gonna start at the tail light. When you receive your kit, it's gonna come with a few sections of harness, and we're gonna start with the rear section, which is this tail light section. And the tail light section will have two tail light plugs and main connector on one of the sides. That main connector is actually gonna go on the passenger side, whereas in the Gladiator, it was switched. So we actually switched the whole install on you, and we had to run it down the passenger side for this one. So this is going to be where you're going to start, is on the driver's side tail light. You're going to connect this T connector, run it over to the passenger side, and then move your way forward from there. So to start, we're going to need an 8mm driver, and we can pull out our tail light. All right, on the inside of your tailgate opening, you have your two 8mm bolts that you're going to pull out. One on the top, one on the bottom. Once you got those out, you can simply pop your tail light to the rear. You have two ball joints in there that are going to pop out of their socket. And then to disconnect your plug, you have this red lock up here. You can press down the button after you slide that back, and that'll release your connector. Now, we're not going to be using the tail light at all, so we can set this aside. And from here, this is where we're going to plug in our new harness. Push it in there until it clicks, and the other end I'm going to drop down. All right, with that harness hanging down below, I can grab the new tail light, which has your blind spot monitor sensor in here. You can see it's much bigger than the original because of that side profile, and it is also LED, so this is going to look cooler as well as be much more functional. Make sure to slide that lock back over, and we can just pop this back into place. All right, when it's snapped in, now we can put our two 8mm back in, then we'll zip tie those lines and go towards the passenger side. All right, so what we're gonna have Danny do right now is just run that harness through the bumper. I'm gonna try and stay clear of anything moving or anything hot. That's the good rule of thumb. So whenever you're running wires under a vehicle, it's a good idea to either follow a factory harness or just be mindful of moving parts and hot parts like the exhaust, and you should be fine. And as you make your way over to the passenger side, you're actually going to have to run that wire up into the taillight cavity, because that's going to plug into the passenger side taillight. So once we get it all the way over, we'll jump back up and remove that taillight and continue with the install. All right, we're going to do the same thing on the passenger side that we did on the driver. Pull these 8mm out. All right, now that our taillight's removed, I can go ahead and fish our harness up through the taillight cavity. But before I fish it in there, I'm gonna go ahead and connect that main body section, which is this long section here, which has the similar connector on there as our taillight section. And basically these are keyed only one way. You can't get any of this stuff wrong. It'll only plug in one way, and the other end will run towards the front of the vehicle. Now that we got that plugged in, I'll feed this up through here. Get our other factory taillight connector plugged in, and now we can go ahead and plug in our new taillight. All right, now we're ready to reinstall the taillight, and we can get those wires ran up to the front. All right, so what Danny's gonna do here is basically the same like before. We're just gonna have him run this straight through to the front of the Jeep. We're making our way to the rear passenger compartment. There's a grommet actually right above the fuel tank over there that we can access into the cab of the truck. So just like before, you want to avoid anything hot and moving. All right, so to access that grommet, what you're gonna need to do is lift up your rear seats. If you have a storage tray under here, you're gonna wanna pull this storage tray out. This is 4 10mm bolts that are holding this down. We'll pull this out of the way. And now we can go from the passenger side door sill. We can pull that back. We just need to pull up on this carpet so we can access that grommet. All right, with our storage tray out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the jack here. As well, the grommet is right around this area here, so it helps when the jack is removed as well, so we can pull that carpet back enough to access it. All right, and from here, you can grab your carpet, pull it back, and that'll give you access to this grommet right here. We can pull that grommet out, and we have Danny underneath the truck right now. It's gonna feed us up that harness. All right, you wanna pull all the slack out of there. And from here, you're basically just gonna cut a slit into here, feed this wire through the grommet, and put the grommet back in place. If you do a lot of off-roading with your Jeep and you go into some pretty high standing water and you're worried about water coming up from the floor, you can put some silicone back over that slit that you created in this grommet. Otherwise, it's totally fine without anything. All right, so we got our wire through. Now we can just move on to running this towards our passenger side glove compartment. All right, so from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pull out on our door trim panels at the bottom here, the door sill plate, and just kind of work my way towards the front while tucking this wire underneath there. If you want to be very thorough, you can pull all these panels out, but it's not necessary. Once you have your wire far enough forward, we can go ahead and put everything back together back here that we took out. So we'll tuck the carpet back in, put our jack back down, and then we can put our storage bin back in. All right, when you get your harness up towards the passenger side compartment, what we're gonna need to do is pull off our kick panel, and that's basically pulling off this little cover here that's covering our wires, pulling off this 10mm nut, and we can also release our door's wiring harness from this hook. And then you want to pop your kick panel towards the center of the vehicle to release the retaining clips. All right, you can pop off your door plug here with a panel tool, and we'll go ahead and disconnect this as well. We're gonna have to get into our doors to run our new mirror wire harness up there, so we can disconnect all the plugs that are running into the door right now, and we can pull our kick panel free. All right, and from here you're gonna see we have a little star connector here. This is a CAN plug. This is gonna tap into your CAN connection or the vehicle's data connection behind the glove box. And this section is actually gonna attach to the front body harness of our main BSM kit. So you can go ahead and plug that into each other. You'll notice one side is very short. This is for the passenger side. And the other side is very long. This is gonna run over to your driver's side, as well as this cigarette lighter plug, which we're gonna have to pull our climate controls out and gain access to the power port that's in our center console. So from here, I'm just gonna tuck this harness up underneath our carpet. And coming up here where you have your factory wiring harnesses ran, I'm gonna go ahead and put a zip tie around this harness and the factory harness to kind of keep it all secure and really looking factory. When somebody pulls this apart, they won't really tell what we did. From here, what I'm gonna do is take the glove box out. And to do that, it's pretty simple. You drop your glove box. Up top, you have a little flap on the dashboard side that you're gonna lift up. That's gonna free the glove box from the dash, and you can go ahead and pull straight down. You also have a gear in here that this is the mechanism that actually slows the glove box down when you're pulling it out, and that'll just slide completely out of there when you release the little flap that's holding the glove box in. Once you angle it enough, it'll just slide out of its mount here. We'll set that aside. And with the glove box removed, you have access to your two data points. You have a green cavity and a white cavity, and the white cavity has some green plugs in it. The green cavity has some white plugs in it. You're gonna wanna plug your connector into the white cavity on the right. Doesn't matter which one it goes into, any free port is fine. So we'll just plug it in right there. That's all you have to do to access your vehicle's data connection. Now we can move forward with connecting our main body harness to the front part of our body harness. And again, this is all keyed. It'll only go in one way. You can't get it wrong. Press it together nice and secure, wait for the click. And now on this section of harness, you have two of the same type of connector, one on a very short line, the other one on a very long one. This side is for the passenger side. The long side goes towards the driver's side. You're gonna have to run that longer section underneath your carpet over to the driver's side of the vehicle. And you also have an easy DC connection on here that we included. This is going to attach to your power port located in the center console, and this is going to power the entire system. So before we proceed and run the wires over to the driver's side, I'm going to remove the center stack so I can gain access to the power port back here. This screen is a prototype screen. Yours is not going to look like this, and yours is not going to come apart like this. But ours is a 10-inch screen that hopefully we'll be releasing soon, so stay tuned. But basically, you pop your knee bolster, that little plastic panel down just in the corner. You can grip your climate control, pull that out, and you can disconnect that as well as your push the start button. For the window switches in your power port, you have a single Phillips screw or 7mm screw. We'll go ahead and pull that out. And now this whole panel is just held in with some clips. All right, we can pop that out, and this is the guy that we need here. It's our power port plug. We'll disconnect that, and I'm actually gonna have this hanging on the side. I'm gonna run my wires over from the glove box across all back here and make our way over to the driver's side. All right, so I have my driver's side mirror plug and my cigarette lighter or power port plug here. I'm gonna run that up behind the edge of the glove box here on the bottom, on the back side obviously. Then from up above your AC duct behind here, right next to your blower, right behind this arm, there's an opening. And you can just fish that wire. Right there, you can see our wire popped out. Now we can just pull the slack right through there. The cigarette lighter plug is a little bit bigger, but it should fit no problem. All right, now that we have our power port in the center of our dash, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab the plug that plugs into the factory power port. I'll grab the Easy DC. There's a short little section that will plug in to the factory plug. This will plug back into the factory power port, and this extra line here will come back and go into the one that we just fed up into our center console. Now all of this slack that we have here, I'm gonna zip tie this up, make it nice and organized, and I'll coil it up and I'll leave it just back in this area so when we put everything back together, it's not gonna take up too much space. All right, the driver's side mirror connector, we're just gonna continue over running it behind our dash here. There's another little spot in the same area that we ran the wire over from the passenger side. There's that same spot on the driver's side. So I'll feed that in there, and then I'll grab that from the driver's side when I move over to that side. All right, and here's our wire. I'll go ahead and pull that slack out. All right, with all the slack pulled in here, I'm gonna go ahead and zip tie it on this bar that's behind our knee bolster. And just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm gonna pop down this plastic knee bolster panel. And you can see this support here. Just gonna run it right behind it. There's actually a couple of holes there I'm gonna utilize. All right, and that's pretty much it. I'm gonna pop this panel back on, and now we can move on to removing the doors and getting our door harness installed. All right, and actually before we move on to the doors, we have our whole center console with the guts exposed. I'm gonna go ahead and put all this back together. So the only thing we have left to worry about is the doors. Don't forget to plug your power port back in before you snap everything back together. All right, now from here, I'm gonna do the same thing that I did on the passenger side. I'm gonna pull off the kick panel. And from here, before I disconnect this door connector, I'm gonna turn the ignition on and roll the window down. It's not necessary, but because I'm gonna be taking the side view mirror off by myself, it kind of makes it easier when the window is out of the way so I can reach in from the inside as I unbolt the mirror. So let me turn the ignition on. All right, now I can go ahead and pull apart my door connector. And I have that extra plug on our Jeep here, and this is because we previously installed passive entry on this Jeep. I'll slide the harness over the hook and get that out of the way. All right, now I'm ready to remove our door panel, and I'm basically just going to start from the top, work my way down. Behind the handle here, you have a little plastic cover that has a groove up top that you can stick a screwdriver in or something, pop that panel free, and that'll expose a T30 Torx bit that's behind there. I'm going to pull that out, and then right below at our armrest, you have 2 more T30 Torx screws. And then straight below the door, at the very bottom, you have 2 T20 Torx. All right, with all the screws removed, there's just a bunch of retaining clips around the door that are holding it on. They're pretty strong. You may need a panel removal tool to pop them free, or if you yank hard enough, right around where the clips are, you should be able to pop those free just with your hands. All right, up at the top here, you can just lift up that top door edge over that rubber weather stripping. And behind the door, this one came off already, but basically this top cable is just held in by sliding into the channel here. Once you pop that out and free, there's a little groove in here that this cable falls into. Just like that. And that's how you remove it. The bottom one is a little bit more complicated. There's a couple of clips on here. And you might be able to do it with your finger, but it helps if you have some kind of pry tool to press on those little clips. You're gonna have to pull towards the back side of that hole, and you're basically fighting the tension of that spring that's in there. So when you pull back, that'll clear the hole, and you can free everything from the channel, just like how it was on top. And down at the bottom, we have our door connector. Unplug that, and your whole door is free. All right, and from here, this is the reason why I rolled the window down, is because I can work on both sides of the door all by myself. And basically I got a T40 Torx bit, and I'm gonna unscrew this from the outside of the door with my arm on the inside of the door, and this is so I can support the side mirror once I get all the screws out. All right, with the screws out, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tilt down on the mirror. You can see there's a large portion of that bracket is actually buried underneath the door. So if you tilt downwards, you'll clear that mirror hole that's in the door. And from here, we can press our plug in and disconnect our mirror. You won't be using this mirror anymore, so we can set this aside. From this point on, we're gonna attach our included T-harness and run that through the door, which is technically the hard part. All right, with our side view mirror removed, we're gonna have to access this hole to run our harness through. This is just a rubber grommet. And once you pull that free from that hole there, you'll have enough room to run a zip tie. Now, on the inside of this door edge here, there's the window channel. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get this zip tie to hug the door skin on the inside, so it goes around that window channel. Is basically this harness is gonna have to come from that outside hole through here into this, and basically run down to our door, the end of our door harness. So I'm gonna feed this zip tie through. As you notice, the bend is hugging towards the door skin, just like this here. And now from the other side, I'm gonna go look through that hole and make sure that I'm clearing that window channel, and I'll get that zip tie pulled through that hole. I'll tape the end of our connector on there and then pull it back through. All right, and from this side, you can see the inside of that door frame, that door channel that I was talking about. That's what we're trying to miss. Right there, you can see our zip tie is actually on the back side of that door edge. If you're to run this on the front side of it, when you roll down your window or roll your window up, it would damage that wire and or the window. That's pretty crucial. You want to make sure that it's on the opposite side of that window channel so you're not interfering with your Windows operation. But on this side, I'm going to go ahead and throw some tape around my connector and pull it through to the door. All right, now we can pull this through, and you're going to kind of want to guide that connector so you're not getting stuck on anything. All right, when you get your wire pulled through, you're going to want to pull all the slack out, connect your factory mirror plug, and I'm going to throw a couple zip ties on here just so it looks nice and organized. And then we can install our new blind spot monitor mirrors into the factory location. All right, so I got the new mirror in hand. Just by looking at the mirror, you're not really going to tell too much of a difference, but in the top left corner, you will notice that there's a little tiny triangle in there. That's your blind spot monitor indicator. That's the thing that's going to light up orange. So that is the only physical difference that you're going to see. Now, when you're plugging this in, this connector here is usually around right there. If you just take the plug and you go to plug this in, a lot of times this gets pushed deep into the mirror and it'll seem like you plugged it in when you actually didn't. What you're going to want to do is pull out on that harness and kind of hold it with your fingers. So when you plug it in, you can make sure it clicks into place and you're not just pushing it deeper into that cavity. But now that we got it plugged in, slide that bottom of the mirror into the door hole first, rotate it up, and I have all my factory torque screws in hand. I'm just going to reach around and screw those in. All right, now we can just tighten the mirror down. All right, so with our mirror mounted, all that's left is cutting a nice little hole in this rubber grommet here, running this wire through it. I'm going to zip tie it along our factory door harness, and I'll end up taping it behind our door harness at the bottom. I'll go over that when I get there. And then we can feed the grommet back into the door. Just like that. Make sure you pull all the slack out of there, and we can just throw some zip ties on here. All right, now when we get it down to the end of the harness that runs from our door to the Jeep, from here, what you can do if you want to be very thorough is you can actually snip these wires, run it through your door boot or your door harness, and connect it back on the other side, as this connector is just a little too big to run into the factory loom. I'm just going to run this behind or on the back side, and I'm going to throw some tape around there so it doesn't look like there's a zip tie or anything weird on there. All right, and just like that, you want this connector to be in the same general area as your factory plug, and this is so you can always disconnect your doors if you need to. We have our passive entry, like I mentioned earlier, BSM, and our main door connector. And I'm just gonna loop the door harness around that factory hook down there. All right, and that's pretty much it. Now we can throw our door panel back on and we'll finish up our wiring. All right, we can reconnect our connector that goes behind the door. Make sure to slide that little lock over, put our handle and our lock cables back in. Just like that. And now we're ready to lift this door panel over the door frame, slide it down, and we can snap our retaining clips back in. And you want to make sure those retaining clips line up before you start putting pressure on them. Because if they're not in the right position, you can snap the little heads off of them. All right, we're gonna work our way from the top. Starting behind the handle here is the T30. Snap the little cover back on. All right, now with the wire that we met at our driver's side kick panel, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna get all the slack. I'm gonna coil it up here. Shouldn't be too much. And I'm gonna zip tie it so it's right around the same area as our door connector. That's pretty much it. We're ready to put our kick panel back on. We'll reconnect all of our wires and we'll move on to programming. Making sure my passive entry wire is hanging out there. Now I can slide the factory door harness over that little hook. And we can just plug everything else back in now. Before we put that connector on, I'm going to put the 10 mil back in. That secures our kick panel. And whatever slack we have, I'm going to tuck it down into here. So when we put this cover back on, everything will be nice and hidden. All right, now that I got the driver's side wrapped up, I'm gonna run over to the passenger side, reinstall the kick panel and glove box, then we can move on to programming. All right, now we're ready to install the security bypass. All right, so coming up underneath the dash, right next to your OBD2 port, if you look right above it, you have a couple of connectors up there. That is your security gateway module. We include a security gateway bypass that you're gonna have to actually plug those connectors into. What I'll do is disconnect each one of these, leaving me with these two connectors. I'll plug this into our security gateway module or bypass, and then I can run our OBD Genie programmer into the vehicle to program our vehicle to know that passive entry is now an included option. All right, now that the security bypass is installed, I'm going to turn the ignition into the run position, hitting that button twice, and I can plug in our Genie. All right, the green light and horn honk says that it's programmed. We can pull that off. I'll turn the ignition back off. We'll give it a couple minutes to kind of configure itself, and we'll turn it back on and test out the blind spot monitor. All right, we let the vehicle sleep for a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it on into the run position. Immediately when you turn it on, you'll see the triangles on the mirrors light up, or they'll flash. That's a test sequence. That's the mirrors checking if everything is there. We come to safety and driving assistance. You'll see we have our park sense, we have hill start, and right in the middle we have our blind spot. You can turn that on, off, and on lights plus chime. So if you do just lights, the indication will just be in the mirror itself. You won't hear any audible tones throughout your speakers. If you do lights plus chime, when there's somebody in your blind spot or in the next lane over, you'll get an audible warning when you turn your blinker on. It'll tell you that it's not safe to make that lane change. All right, so we just wrapped up the install. Danny and I was able to knock this out in about 4 hours. We are professionals though. If you're not comfortable doing this kind of work, definitely give yourself a weekend. Make sure to be patient, watch the video a couple times so you feel confident when you're doing the install. But overall, it's really not that bad. It's plug and play. So it's just plugging in a bunch of connectors and zip tying a bunch of wires. If you're comfortable with that, you should be good. Just take your time. If you like this install and this upgrade and you want to see more just like it, head back to infotainment.com. Thanks for watching.